Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going over the rifle that you see in my hands right here. This is the NPAP DF. DF signifies that it is the underfolding version of this rifle. If you guys are looking around on the internet for one, that's how you know. Of course, the picture also helps as well, but as we know, many AK companies don't put the right pictures in there. So this one comes in from Serbia, former Yugoslavia, so it is made in a block military factory. Now, this is one that's priced at a pretty low price point, at least in the market right now today, and it's one that's attracting a lot of people who want their genuine block built AKs. So what we're going to do is do a little bit more shooting with it, then get into the details of the rifle, and at the end we'll kind of wrap it up with a little bit of summary, let you guys know what I think of it overall, and that should pretty much do it. We'll start out here on the end and work our way back. The muzzle device that comes with it is a slant muzzle device. It works fine. It does help prevent muzzle rise a little bit, and it does have a C marking on there for 922R compliance, indicating that it was made by Century Arms. If you actually take this off, you can see that at some point this muzzle device, not this one particularly, but a muzzle device, was actually tack welded and pinned to the threads there for import reasons. Kind of just an interesting little aside there. And those threads underneath there are 14 by 1 millimeter, so any of your standard AK muzzle devices will fit just fine without issues. So moving back here to our front sight tower, the pins look good. One's a little bit over compared to the other, but that's just kind of how AKs are sometimes. The front sight is zeroed at 50 yards, and you can see here it's basically centered. So in terms of AK cant and front sight cant, not a whole lot of it here on this rifle, which is certainly a good thing. The rifle does come with a cleaning rod, however it does have the bayonet lug here ground down. Not sure why that is, but all of the NPAP underfolders I've seen come that way. Up front here we have our front sling swivel. And then the handguards that we have on here are actually a set of Battlefield pickup ones from Apex Gun Parts that I bought. They're from the Balkan Wars, so you can see there we have the engraving on there that one of the soldiers, of course, did out in the field. However, the wood that comes from the factory is basically an unstained U.S. wood, and it looks good. If you wanted to do some woodwork on it, I'd imagine you could get that wood looking pretty good. The length of the Yugo handguards is a little bit different. So the NPAP, the OPAP, and the other variants out there are a little bit longer. So if you're looking to replace these with anything aftermarket, make sure you get ones that are designated for Yugoslavian AKs. Of course, it's made in Serbia nowadays, but on the AK sites, you're going to see them generally listed as Yugoslavian handguards. So nothing too crazy to think about there. The wood that comes with it works fine. I just thought it would be kind of a cool look to go with those handguards instead. The rear sight is your typical AK leaf rear sight. It is adjustable, so that way you can zero it and then use the ladder to dial in your elevation should you choose to do so. I know some folks do like to do that. So if that's you, you do have the option there. But nothing too fancy going on. It is interesting that it sort of is in the white on the top, as opposed to a lot of the other AKs from different countries where it'll actually be painted black over the numbers. The NPAP receivers are 1 millimeter thick, like most AKMs. The OPAP, their brother, if you will, from Serbia, has the RPK style front trunnion, which has the bulge up here. The NPAPs do not have that. So you can see here we have our safe and fire markings. We have the import marking here as well, of course, and then the model designation and the caliber on there. The safety on these rifles is kind of cool. It has this little ledge that sticks out here, which I do like. It's better than nothing. I wish that ledge, though, was more sort of up here, which would make it act sort of like a Krebs enhanced safety. If you have really long fingers, you can get up there, or if you're a lefty and you're operating it with your thumb, that's probably the biggest advantage of it, at least as far as I can see. But folks here in the US who shoot on a lot of shooting ranges that make you show clear, the safety does have the cutout for it. So that way, if you want to actually lock your bolt open, you can with the cutout there on the safety. So I know some people do like that. I don't really shoot on public ranges too often, so it's not a huge deal for me, but I know for a lot of you guys out there, it is a big deal. On the left side of the receiver, we don't really have anything fancy going on. Of note, there is no optics rail like most underfolding AKs have. And then we have our button here, which allows us to underfold the stock. Now let's talk about the stock a little bit here. It's a typical underfolder, basically goes straight back. Some of them, like the Bulgarians, will tend to have sort of a downward slant. I prefer the straight back ones. However, like any underfolder, shooting it is just not going to be as comfortable as it would be if you were shooting a fixed stock. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. I added a quick paracord wrap there just to help, and it definitely does help. It makes your teeth chatter a little bit less when you're firing it, so that's a good thing. You could, of course, do both sides, and you could also do the back here, which really would probably help more than anything. But the way I did it was just to leave enough that it would actually still function and you could still underfold it. So basically, to do that, you're just going to push the button in here and collapse it down. And when you get up here to this point, you need to make sure that your shoulder rest is all the way down. Go up and it will click into place. Now at this point, you're just going to push the button to open it up, come all the way back out, and you'll hear it clicks into place again. And then you're ready to fire. Now I should also note this one here does have a little bit of wobble like most underfolders do have, so you guys can see that. I'm not sure how obvious it is on camera. There is a little bit of wobble to it, but that is pretty normal for underfolding AKs. The trigger on the gun is Century's RAK trigger. I really like this trigger. I have it at a few guns at this point, and I like it a lot. Basically, it has a constant pull from the time you touch it. There's not really any slop in the beginning, and it kind of rolls into the break. And right about there was where we get to the break, and it breaks. It breaks nice and clean. It's definitely good for accuracy. It's very predictable. The reset's very positive there, as you can see. So no issues at all with the trigger. It breaks right around 4 pounds and really just feels good overall. Disassembling the Yugo AKs is a little bit different than some of the others out there on the market. We have this little button here on the back that has to be pushed in order to depress the recoil spring. So I'm just going to push it in. At that point, the recoil spring will go home. You can pull up on your top cover and pull it out. At the same time, again, if you want to push your recoil spring out, you need to depress it again to make sure it can go forward. The reason that's there, for those that don't know, is so that the rear cover doesn't pop off when you're firing a grenade. So if you have a grenade launcher underneath, it keeps it in place. So you pull this out, and there is our bolt carrier group. You guys can get a look there inside, see what everything looks like. It's pretty clean. I should note there that it is electro penciled through production, which I think is kind of cool. So we have the markings there. Those markings also correlate here on the bolt, if I can get it out and you guys can see. So it is kind of a cool thing to know that over there in Serbia, this Zastava factory, they're actually paying attention to those sorts of things, which is important because for the AK, you need to make sure you headspace your barrel, your trunnion to your bolt. It's not like an AR where you can just drop it in. So it is a good thing. Take a look there. We see our trigger. In the receiver, it actually doesn't have a lot of wear. This rifle right now has just over 1,000 rounds through it, so it's doing pretty well in terms of that. You can see our barrel, and if you look in there, it is not chrome lined. So that's one of the things about the Yugoslavian rifles. It's different than most AKs, is that, well, with the exception of their 5.56 rifles, they don't have chrome lining. So they are cold hammer forged barrels. That's a good thing. They certainly seem to shoot well, but compared to like a Russian or Bulgarian, that is sort of one of the downsides of it, in my opinion. Now, these days in America, most folks aren't shooting corrosive ammo, so it's not a huge deal in terms of that, but it will decrease your barrel a little bit versus the chrome line ones, so just keep that in mind. Seeing as I just mentioned the round count, I know people want to know if the back of the carrier looks smashed, and you guys can see there, it doesn't. So that's certainly a good sign. It shows a little bit of mushrooming to it, but not much. You can see here in the pictures we're rolling in. It's pretty good. It has a slight amount, but really almost none. For 1,000 rounds, that's perfectly normal. And the bolt itself looks good as well. All the lugs look good, no abnormal wear. So it seems to be holding up just fine. The bolt and carrier on the Yugoslavian rifles does come in the white, so there's no finish on it like some of the other countries. That's just something that sort of differentiates it out there, but I've never seen anybody have any problems with these. They seem to work just fine. For about 2/3 of the rounds that were fired through this rifle during the testing, I used this right here. This is the Ultimak rail. It's the M9, and that is designed to fit the Serbian or Yugoslavian AKs. So for a long time, one of the big issues here in the US was finding accessories for these rifles. And kind of like I mentioned earlier, there's more and more of them out there, and one of them that's available, of course, is this Ultimak rail. These rails are excellent. They allow you to mount optics. They allow you to mount lights too if you want to. And basically they just mount underneath the barrel. Some folks have a fear that with the Ultimaks that you're going to lose a little bit of accuracy due to the fact that it's actually clamping onto the underside of the barrel. I've never found that to be true. With Ultimak rails, the accuracy is just as good. Some people report that it's better. Really, personally, myself, I haven't seen any shift in it. It shoots just as well with as without it. These are a really good product if you're looking to add those capabilities. Like I said, either optics, since you don't have an optics rail on this rifle, or add a light or something like that if you're looking for a home defense rifle. So I think these are right around $100. So we'll post a link down below for those that are looking. But just wanted to mention that because I'm sure you guys have seen it during the shooting footage. So I wanted to cover it and make sure we sort of let you guys know what was going on there. The first AK rifle I ever owned many years ago was actually a Serbian variant. And back then, one thing you really had to watch out for was the magwell cut. You can see there, this magwell has been cut after it gets into the country. Sentry does that, again, for 922R compliance. They open it up so that it can take standard AK mags. So back then, like I said, it was a big deal. And like if you were out buying an AK, you really had to check for mag fitment, particularly if it was one of the Zastava rifles. These days, I've not found that to be true at all. The cutouts seem to be really good, and haven't had any issues there. So we'll just try a couple. These are the new Serbian AK mags, so bolt hole open followers. You can see they fit in there just fine. The slightest amount of wiggle, which again for an AK is completely normal. And then you can see here we'll have the waffle mag. This is the blue waffle. If you're really bored, go ahead and Google blue waffle, but you can see they fit in there just fine. Again, a slightest amount of play, but that's how they're designed to work. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that these rifles were some of the lowest cost, at least right now in the US anyway, of com block rifles. So these right now are generally going for $600 or less. You know, if you can find a deal, you might be able to find it for a little bit less. So things are sort of upside down right now, at least as I film this in July 2017, where you can get a decent AR for a relatively low price, but to get a decent AK, generally speaking, is going to cost you some money, and these are some of the exceptions to that. Basically, the NPAP and then the Wasser are going to be the cheapest com block AKs that you can find right now in America, and this one here has been great. Like I said, just over 1,000 rounds fired through it. We had one malfunction. It was a failure to fire. The primer was struck. It didn't go off, and we were using Red Army standard for that, so I don't know if it was, you know, ammo related or if the firing pin didn't go far enough forward. Hard to say. I didn't reload it and check, but we had one malfunction. Other than that, if the primer popped, the gun went bang and it cycled, so that's a good thing. Reliability is pretty good, like you'd expect for an AK. The majority of the rounds we fired through it were Red Army standard. We fired some Federal brass case stuff just to test that it worked. We fired a couple rounds of Wolf hollow point, probably 2 mags, I'd say. I think they're 123 grain hollow point just to make sure it would function. Sometimes AKs, for those that don't know, don't like hollow points, had no issues. So the gun, in terms of running, ran fine. I didn't do an accuracy test because without the added benefit of magnification, I'm not sure it's all that fair of a test. However, I did review the fixed stock version of this rifle a couple of years ago, and on a bench, you know, with the scope and all that stuff, I was able to get right between 2 and 3 inch groups, depending on the ammo we use, which is exactly what I would expect from this rifle. I don't really see any difference there. I'm sure with magnification or a really competent shooter, you can get groups like that with most of the steel cased ammo out there. So I think it's a good rifle. If you're looking for an underfolder and you're looking for one that's built right, this is one I would definitely take a look at. The downsides of it are, number one, that it's an underfolder. So unless you want to use it as like a truck gun or something like that, where you want to keep it folded up, maybe in the back of your truck, you know, in this configuration, that sort of is an advantage to it. It's very light and compact in that role, if you will. But the downside of it is that shooting underfolders is not all that comfortable. That's just not. Some are better than others. This one, like I said, has a more straight inline stock, which I personally prefer versus the angle ones. The angle ones just, they really beat me up. This one is not bad for an underfolder, but it's still an underfolder. That's one of the cons of it. The other con, like I mentioned earlier, versus some of the com block competitors out there, is that it doesn't have a chrome line barrel. So you can't probably expect the same amount of life out of it that you would with, say, like an Arsenal SLR type rifle, but it doesn't cost the same either. So pros and cons to each. Other things you may think or hear out there is that I've heard that the receivers are soft. Now, I think that was true for a period of time. I saw evidence of it. You know, every now and then you'd see like egging and stuff like that of the trigger pins. If you look at the ones here, no issues at all. It doesn't appear soft in any way. If you look at the rear trunnion, there's no beating up or abnormal wear marks or anything like that. It appears to be solid in that regard. The rivets look good. Build quality just looks good overall. I don't really see anything wrong with this particular example. So I think it's a good rifle. And again, if you have the money for it and it's something you're interested in, I'd check it out. So that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions about the rifle or anything else that we talk about here in the review, you can always post down below in the comment section. You can also post over at the Facebook page. As always, that is by far the best way to get in touch with me these days. I don't always see the comments down below in the comment section, but I do see most of them over on my Facebook page. So that's it, guys. If you are a subscriber, thank you very much for subscribing. Please go ahead and hit that like button. If you're new to the channel and you found this through a search, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you like what you see, it's pretty representative of most of the videos we do here. So that's about it. Thanks for watching. We hope to see you guys in the next video.